It's for real.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Nostalgia Crackdown here on the Let's Get Ready Network. I'm Adelia, that's my buddy Josh, and this month we are talking about a request from one of the people in the comments of one of our previous episodes, Leo Logan, who requested we discuss the teams that only played together once. Now, by my count, which could be off, there were 59 different teams that only played together once. So we're not going to talk about all of them because we'd be here for way too long. And to be perfectly honest, some of them just weren't very memorable. I mean, I didn't remember some of these people had played together until we started doing some little bit of research for the show. Josh, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for this episode. We're not doing all of them, but you can consider this kind of best of the most memorable, and we kind of got them each in a category, if you will. We got different categories because some of these teams do kind of fit together in interesting ways that we're going to talk about.
Yeah. So the first set of teams that we're going to talk about is Remember the Teams. These are ones that just quick little hits on. I didn't remember that these people had actually played in the Schmoedown or had played together in the Schmoedown, and so we're just going to bring them up. First up, we have the Malton Falcons. This was legendary film critic Leonard Maltin and his daughter Jessie. They took on the other one-time team of the CinemaSins, Jeremy Scott and Chris Atkinson. I don't remember these guys at all, but the Malton Falcons came out on top in that one, lost the CinemaSins in that one. Neither one of these teams played again. Then we have the Force Bros. Freddie Prinze Jr. and Sam Witwer played a teams match against the team of the Council, John Campia and Ken Knapsack. And this one we're going to talk about a little bit just because this is, I believe, one of the very few instances of blatant cheating that we ever saw in the Schmoedown. Freddie Prinze Jr. gave a correct verbal answer while what he had written on his board was different than what he said. The match eventually went to sudden death, and Witwer and Freddie won. It caused the Freddie Prinze Jr. rule to be created for the Schmoedown, which is what you say and what you have written on the board have to match, because you can't change your answer after you've heard other people give the right answer. So, Josh, do you remember this at all?
I don't remember because at the time this came out, it was when I was just starting the Schmoedown. And when I was just starting the Schmoedown, if I'm being completely honest, did not care about Star Wars. Just true. I was not a huge Star Wars fan. Like, I enjoyed the movies. And, like, a Star Wars team match had very little. So I think I still watched it. But, like, it's weird because there wasn't a Star Wars teams division announced. So, like, in my head, there was no build-up to this. It's like, oh, it's just one match, I guess, to be fun. But, like, part of my enjoyment of the Schmoedown is the build-up. It's the working towards that championship belt. And I remember I was like, and there's no follow-up Star Wars teams matches, if I remember correctly. So, like, there was there's no reason for me to go back to that match or remember it. But I don't even remember the cheating scandal, but that much because I wasn't as into the Schmoedown when this happened. But it is an interesting thing to look back on, and in some ways, this is a match that made the future Schmoedowns better because it made a rule come out of it to just fully stop the cheating, if you will. And then now it caused the announcers to have to keep an eye on that now.
Yeah, and two big moments came out of having this rule in place. The Jane Fonda moment with Roca, the David O. Russell moment. Like, those were big moments in the history of the Schmoedown that were the direct result of this rule that came from this match. We also had a trio play a match once. We had the B team, which was Cody Hall, Ace Cabrera, and Christian Ruvalcaba, a.k.a. Cobster. This was in Season 2. The only trio that I think ever played a match as a trio. They did not win. We also had Scott Mance and Alicia Malone as a team once. They took on ETC, which was Dewberry and Ricky Hayberg, and lost, which might surprise some people. We also had this one I remember very well. This is Double Jeopardy. This is Sam Levine and Brad Rutter, who's a former Jeopardy champion. They took on the team of Tough Beats, which was Perry Nemiroff and Jonathan Voitko, and lost pretty spectacularly from what I remember. We have the Garden Hosers, actor Thomas Ian Nicholas from Rookie of the Year and American Pie, and Matt Black, who I don't know who he is. Maybe if I'm supposed to know who he is, I don't. They took on the Scream Queens of Haley Fouch and Kaylin Corrigan and lost. And we had Kind of Funny, Nick Scarpino and Greg Miller from the Kind of Funny YouTube channel took on another one-time team, Funhouse, and that was a match that neither of those teams ever played again. So those are just a few of the, hey, remember those teams? Because I didn't.
I mean, those are the type of teams where you look back and you're like, oh, yeah, that did kind of happen. Or maybe one moment of the match kind of pops up. But overall, a lot of those teams are pretty unmemorable when it comes to the Schmoedown history. Some of them are very memorable in their own rights, like having their own YouTube channels or their own fans. But when it came to the Schmoedown, it just didn't leave enough impact to want us to have another match for the most part. I will say the only three-man team to compete, I always found that concept interesting and thought it would be like fun if they were to ever do that again, but like an idea of where it's like 3 fans versus 2 Schmoedown pros and see what would happen there. Or
that
like
would have been interesting.
Yeah, like that, or a handicap match basically where you have 2 A-level players and like 3 C. Just like, I think stuff like that would be fascinating, where it would also maybe give some chances for people who wouldn't have a chance at maybe a team's belt. But if you have a 3-person team and you have that inherent advantage, now it's tough to say who gets that inherent advantage, but it's an interesting thing to look back on, because when that came out, I believe that's season 2. In season 1 and 2, it's all figuring out the game. It's a lot of stuff. I think there was like a like guess this vocal point from like they would have a soundbite and they would play the soundbite and you'd have to guess where that soundbite was from the movie. If I remember correctly.
Season 1 and 2 is very different than the rest of the Schmoedown.
Very experimental in a lot of ways, and that's one of the experiments where I like, for the most part, a lot of it I say stay in season 1 and season 2. But I always thought, I don't know, I'm also one who's happy to go on the wacky side of things if it makes it for more entertaining. And like having a 3-person team in the teams division is kind of like an interesting concept that I know why they never did again, but like it would have been interesting if they ever decided to go back to that route.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to our first group of one-time teams that was pretty memorable. I would say these 3 teams that we're about to talk about were pretty memorable. And these are the championship one-time teams. Teams that played for the first and only time in a championship match. We have Sick in the Head, which is Breanne Chandler cashing in her free-for-all title shot and picking Brian Bishop to take on the Shire Wolves. That did not go very well for them. We had the Odd Couple, which I believe the fans just always called the Otter Couple, and I didn't realize was just called the Odd Couple until I got this screenshot here. They were Jeff Snyder and Janine Bryce, who came in and played after Mark Andreyko had to take some time off, and that did not go well for them, up against Shazam. And the last team in this section is King Arthur Tokyo Drift, which is King Khan and Paul Oyama. This is from the very last spectacular that we had. They were in the last team's championship match ever, and they walked away with the belts.
Yeah, so in this situation, 2 of the 3 teams are because a champion had to step away. And when a champion has to step away, it comes to a weird situation because he's not a one-man show. He's a part of a team. Like Andreyko had to step away and Newman couldn't be in Spectacular. So there had to be a match, but it would be unfair for the other team competitor if they're like, hey, I'm still champion. I want to defend my belt. I want a chance to defend my belt. So that's how we got 2 of those 3 one-person teams. I think I think the Otter Couple or the Odd Couple, but part 2, basically. I think what happened, if I remember correctly, is they called them the otter couple a couple times in the match, but like they didn't but the graphic still said odd couple. So like I think you can call them both and it would be understandable. But I always like the idea of otter couple just because it's like, yeah, it came from this original team, but also it's a different team. I don't think it would make sense for Janine and Jeff to add on to Mark and Jeff's record, if that made sense.
That does make sense, yeah.
So I always like the otter couple. I think that's simpler. That makes sense. That's just naming wise. And that was a great team. Like they almost beat Shazam. If I remember correctly, that was like Shazam's perfect game, and they needed that perfect game to beat the otter couple. So that was a very intense, great game, and they just were up against, which most people would say is the greatest team of all time. And then if you go to Con versus Paul, I just appreciate that Paul Oyama finally got a team's belt, just because he was such a good teams player with Final Exam. I'm blanking on the name of the team before that.
Loose Cannons was his team with Eric Zipper.
Right, Loose Cannons. That was also a good team that I think got split up a bit too short. But I think Paul has shown himself to be a great, great teams player, but he never won the gold. So him winning the gold with Khan, I think, he's the perfect player that you can that him and Janine are both perfect players to kind of like deserves the shot. Makes a great, entertaining match. I'm happy if they won the belt, which Paul did. I wouldn't be. I would understand if they lost. It just made the championship matches still interesting and fun and competitive. Which is like, I feel like if you have a champion back out of a team's match, like in this situation, you have to replace it with someone well known who deserves the shot and like has the championship pedigree that can, and we know that we're going to get a entertaining match, because championship matches should be more. They should always have a guaranteed level of competitiveness and also entertainment. And I think both these teams provided that, unlike the third team, which we can talk about now if you'd like.
Yeah, sick in the head, Brienne and Brian Bishop. Let's be real. This was a ploy to get a female champion in the league, put a team with a woman in Brienne up against the team of the Shire Wolves, who were 2 women, in Clark Wolf and Rachel Cushing. This was not a competitive match at all. I mean, I don't know how many championship match knockouts there actually were in the Schmoedown, but this was one of them. And it's more memorable to me for Clark and Rachel coming in as Thor and Hela than it is for the match itself.
Yeah, I think I remember also going into this match very disappointed, because if you remember the cutscenes and the build-up, once Brienne announced that she was going to use this championship, it was like, I remember at least online, people were like, oh, who is going to be Brienne's partner? I think Brienne's partner is going to be this.
There was big speculation about who Brienne's partner was going to be, and then it was like, it's Brian Bishop, and I think everybody went, who?
It was one
he
of
never
those,
played the Schmoedown before this. He never played the Schmoedown again.
It's just like, you have to deliver that differently if the partner is going to be Brian Bishop, in my opinion, because it's like, if you're going to set it up of like, I'm going for the belt, and you're having all the fans guess on who the teammate is going to be. It's always like the idea where if you're going to do a good mystery is something where you can actually, the fans, the people who are watching it, can figure it out. I don't think anyone unless they were there and saw the match before it was posted, could have been like, Brienne's cashing it in. And then all the fans are like, no fan with no prior knowledge can guess it's going to be Brian Bishop, if you will. Yeah. And it's like, even if the Schmoedown is such an interesting beast. It's like, even if you know your movie stuff, I feel that it's also interesting, because I think this might be one of the only times Free for All was cashed in for teams, because I think a lot of the times it was singles. I'm trying to read, because Sam cashed in for singles, Paul cashed it in for singles, Bibbs never won it.
Bibbs never won it.
Dan cashed it in for teams.
Dan cashed it in for teams with Founding Fathers Against Corruption. I think that was the only other one for teams.
Yeah.
But yeah, this was a moment. The Shire Wolves becoming champions for the first time that I think should have meant a lot more. But kind of didn't because of
It's
who their
also just
opponents
unfair to
were.
the Shire Wolves because the Shire Wolves really earned that shot, and they were such a great team. And to not give them a challenge, if you will, just because of how the match ran out, it's a rough one. It's a rough one in Schmoedown history where it's like, I think if something like that would ever happen again, where a free for all competitor would be like, hey, I want to go to teams and I want to bring this person who's never played before. I think whoever the commissioner is at that point would have to step in and be like, look, why don't you have a couple matches first? And if you go on a win streak and maybe you lose at a number one contender match, then you can like kind of like have something like everything about that match just like angers me. It's one of the things I remember, but not for a good reason because of just how disappointing that match was on every facet and level.
Yeah, I mean, great for the Shire Wolves, but everything else about it was just not good.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to our next section, which is tournament debuts. These are teams that debuted in a tournament. Most of them that we're going to cover came during the digital era, but we do have one team from the Anarchy tournament in this. And so let's start off by talking about the midterms. Jonathan Harris and Eric Zipper. They debuted in the 2021 mid-season tournament and lost to Danger Zone. We had the Old Guard, Alonzo Duralde and Mark Riley. They debuted in the 2021 Ultimate Schmoedown tournament and lost to the Press Room. We had the Untouchables, Paige Frabetti and Drew McWeeny, lost in the 2021 Ultimate Schmoedown to Danger Zone. The Lethal Weapons, Ethan Irwin and Andrew Guy, they lost in the 2020 Ultimate Schmoedown to Deception. And wait, I know this. Winston Marshall and Stacey Howard played at a live event against the Founding Fathers and lost to them during the Anarchy tournament. Josh, what are your initial impressions of these teams?
So the theme of it being digital, I think there's a reason for that. And the reason was once we switched over to digital, it was the same time we were switching over to the faction system. And the faction system, I love the faction system, and I think there's a lot of good things about the faction system. The one thing the faction system had a problem with is teams. Because a lot of teams like debuted and then people would move factions and then you can't keep the team together. It was like teams became a mess because of the faction system. And a lot of those tournament debuts is because the teams division was like after the faction system started, it just completely only like 5 teams stayed together. And so there was so little teams that stayed together during each year. And there were a lot of just changes and stuff like that. But like all these teams that we mentioned, I think there's a lot of very interesting names here. The midterms is the most memorable, in my opinion, out of all the names. I'm going to save Wait I Know This for last because I love that team, and but I'm just going to go over the digital ones right now quickly. The midterms was the most memorable. I don't know if this is true for you, Adelia, but I remember them going up in Danger Zone. Everyone thought it would be a blowout, and it was a really close match. They gave Danger Zone all they can handle, and I'm shocked that they never had another match. I'm even shocked in season 9, Zipper had, we're not going to talk about this, but Zipper actually did have 2 more teams in season 9, which are both one-hit wonders. Like, I'm shocked they just couldn't bring Jonathan Harris back and have the midterms go for either of those matches because that was just such a memorable match, likable team chemistry, and just in general, I was just happy with that. I remember, I guess what they did was the Harris brothers came back together.
The Harris brothers in season 9, yeah.
Which I would have preferred midterms and Harris, put on with someone else, but it is what it is. But I really like that team. Out of all those teams, that's the one I have the fondest memory and the most vivid memory of. What about you, Adelia, with the midterms?
The midterms were a fun team to watch in that one match. I remember it being much closer than I thought it was going to be. They did great against Danger Zone and unfortunately lost. Of the digital era teams in this list, though, the one that stands out to me the most is the Lethal Weapons, because this is where Andrew Guy lost his mind going up against Adam Collins and Marisol McKee, and was just like completely checked out during this match. And I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think Andrew Guy ever played a match again after that.
It was interesting. You were getting the stardom of Adam and Marisol, and this is combined with Ethan and Andrew Guy, which I forgot was a team. And it was just one of those things where like The digital
No.
era wasn't kind to Andrew Guy. I usually would not say that like digital has an effect on match play, except for some very specific circumstances. And I think, and by the way, Andrew Guy did play one more match. It was against Robert Myers Burnett, I believe, right? Or was that before?
No, his that was before this. His last match, I believe, was actually when he came back that one match in season 9 to play with Bateman against Radis and Lomas, which is another match that I had forgotten had happened. But up until that point, this match against Deception would have been his last match.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Like, I think Guy's an interesting, like maybe one of the most interesting competitors and characters to kind of dive into and look at his Schmoedown career. And I think this team could have been extremely deadly, like almost like the family 2.0, if you will, because Irwin is a better player than McWeeny. And I think there's a lot of things Guy can help with when it comes to the strategy. And I think he's a much better player than people give him credit for. And part of the
Andrew Guy is one of the best teams players of all time.
Absolutely,
like,
no question.
He just is.
And it's a shame that like the match went that way, but also they also had a really, really, really tough first round when it came to the tournament, and they had to play against Deception. Like I feel like it was just like it was not only Guy not being on his A game, but also they were going up against Collins and McKee at the height of their powers. So like if they got an easier first round matchup, there would have been a chance that like they still pull out a win, Guy make some adjustments, and like I think that could be a really dangerous team. It is interesting to look back on though, and be like, oh yeah, that did happen, because it honestly I completely forgot until we were doing the research for this video. I completely forgot about this team as well. I was like, oh right, that was a team. Yeah.
So let's talk about Wait, I Know This, because they were fun to watch. Coy Jondrew was their manager during the Anarchy tournament, and they had a fun entrance to this match where they were from Jurassic Park, and there were a couple of people dressed up as dinosaurs. It was really amusing to rewatch when I rewatched it prior to this recording this. What are your thoughts on Wait, I Know This?
When we don't remember this because Winston became a manager, I think, after this match, basically, but Winston's was a really decent teams competitor. World's Finest was a pretty decent team, and then this was a fun match. Even if they had a tough round one assignment with the Founding Fathers, two legends of the game, but they were really fun. In fact, like out of all the teams that are more character focused, I usually don't take a shining to them. Like, but like this was the one team where I'm like, I'm just enjoying the ride. I don't care if they win or lose. They're fun to watch. They're great on the as they're answering questions. Coy's a perfect manager for these two. This was one of those things where I never got the wild berries, but I got this immediately where I'm like, oh, this is fun. This is great. I wish we got more of this. And when it comes to like, when we first got the question from Leo Logan in the comments section, the first team I went to was Wait, I Know This. And that's because I really do love this team. And I I understand why it happened, but also it's such a fun team. I wish there was a different moment in a different where that team was able to continue, play some more matches, have some more fun. It was just a very fun team.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun. Before we move on to our next category, let's hear from Justin on how you can help support the channel.
Hey guys, it's Justin, aka Hambone, just here to let you know a couple of things that we have going on with the channel. One, we have a Patreon. If you can and want to support us, you can do that. As little as $1. You can join the Discord. We also have a merch store where you can get some cool shirts, mugs, and stuff with all of our different shows and labels on there. And thank you for all of our supporters that have already been there with us.
Thank you, Justin. That's patreon.com/LGR_network if you would like to help. Let's talk about Brandon Hanna and Liz Shannon Miller, who were in a couple of different one-time teams on their own, and then were paired up together in a one-time team in season 9. We had Brandon Hanna and Jada Paramo in the category 9, and this was in the 2020 Ultimate Schmoedown. They lost to Snyder and Andreyko. And then we had Liz Shannon Miller and Adam Lavick, who lost to fellow one-time team The Wicked, Jared Haben and Jim Vejvoda, in Season 7 prior to the digital era. So this was actually one of the few last in-studio matches of Season 7. And then they got paired up together in Plot Twist, which played once in season 9 and lost to the ruling class, which was Ty Lieberman and Whitney Seibold. I think Liz Shannon Miller is a very, very good teams player, and Brandon Hanna was always someone that was interesting to me to be in teams. Josh, what did you think about these two?
Absolutely, because Liz Shannon Miller and Ethan go on that run to the championship and lose against Shazam. And then it's interesting, that team breaks up because they want to turn Ethan heel, and I don't think they wanted to turn Liz heel. That's just my own reasoning. I'm not sure if there's any more reasoning or behind the scenes, but that's what makes the most sense to me, because otherwise, Lightning Time was a great team. I remember one of the most shocking things is when they did break up in season 9. That was one of the most shocking things of season 9, because it's like, oh man, they lost against Shazam, but I can't wait to see their second title run, because I knew they had it in them. But Liz Shannon Miller and Hannah are both very fascinating teams players, because Liz is a great teams player. And you look at all her matches, she plays great. And all those matches are close. And she has some bad luck in her teams, just the one-time teams, that is. But I really love the idea of pairing her with an IG player, which happened both with Vlavic and Hannah. I think IG players and teams are a fascinating concept I wish was dived into a bit more and experimented with a bit more, because if the IG player can play decently in round 1 and you pair him up with a stellar singles and team player, which is what Liz was, you have a huge advantage going into the wheel round by putting IG slices on the wheel. And if you don't land on an IG slice, you have a knockout singles and teams player. So it's one of those things where I remember looking at that, and it's why I always was fascinated with Brandon Hanna as a team as well. But he played very, very well. I think the reason we are always interested in Brandon Hanna or teams, or at least I am, because I'm a Brandon Hanna fan, but I think most people were when it came to the teams division. Like you just said, you were interested in Hanna and teams. I think that's because of Category 9. That's because he played very, very well in Category 9. I remember, I think he even outplayed Jader basically in that match. And it was like, oh, wait, if he can do that and do that on a consistent basis and be able to put 2 IG slices on the wheel if he needs to for his team, that's dangerous and that's interesting. And that would be fascinating to watch. Both these players feels like, one of those things where they just couldn't get a consistent thing going, despite being in close matches, despite being there, despite being interesting personalities within the game. But I don't know. I just thought this section was interesting. I was the one who pushed for this section because I just thought it was interesting that both these players teamed up together, and they're both between them, they have so much one team experience.
Yeah, when they got paired together in season 9, I was like, okay, this is interesting. I'm not sure how I feel about it, but it's interesting. Brandon Hanna did play very well in that Category 9 match against the Odd Couple. He's a very underrated player, Brandon Hanna, I think. But it was always interesting to me when I saw an IG player dip their toes into singles or teams. We saw at the last free-for-all, Saul and Amaru Moses did very, very well in singles questions. Brandon Hanna showed in the teams that he could do very well in singles questions. And I think that given time, he and Liz Shannon Miller could have complemented each other very well in Plot Twist. Unfortunately, it just never got that time.
Absolutely.
All right, let's move on to talk about a couple of some of the teams from the very last season that played only once. We had the Alliance, which was Smets and Andraco. They lost to fellow one-time team Wingblades of Glory, which was Sean Wingblade and Glory Jean. We had Impact, which was Marisol McKee and Mike Kalinowski. They beat the team of Radis and Brother Lomas. We had, because this team exists, we also had this team, which was Chance Ellison and Travis Fishburne. Easy Street, they beat No Vacancy, which was Paige Betty and Eric Zipper. We had the Dojo, Mark Riley and Jacoby Bancroft. They lost to they beat fellow one-time team The Culture, which was Amaru Moses and Clee Wiggins. We had the Exclusives, which was the Barbarian and Gold Leader and their incredible matching jackets. They lost to the System, which was Janine and the Database in season 9. And then we had one of the weirdest matches I think we've ever had in the Schmoedown. Peggy Gubbins and the Survivor, David Jindoyan, versus what turned out to be Danger Zone, but we didn't know it was Danger Zone at the time because Dan Murrell was covered head to toe and using a voice box to disguise his voice and pretending to be Jeff. Which, that match, let's just start there. That match was so strange. I didn't even want to revisit it for this, but I realized that we have to. Because I can't remember another match in the Schmoedown other than when Mark Andreyko pretended to be Finstock and Makuga beat him. Where we had someone pretending to be someone else in a match. Do you have any other memories of that?
I kind of love that match because if you look back on that match, it's a different experience rewatching it just because now that you know it's Dan and Dan acting and doing like, I think he did like a Shy Guy routine basically as Jeff basically. Yeah. And I think that I like big swings in the Schmoedown. I like when it gets a bit silly at moments, and I really enjoyed this match just because Dan really goes all in on the character work in that match. Like, he did. There's a lot of things you can say about that match, and one thing you can't say, it's not memorable. It's very memorable, which I always appreciate about the match. It's something where it's like it's a big swing, and for some people it could be a hit. Like me, I do really enjoy this match, but I can totally see someone being like, "Yeah, I just didn't like that match," and it's like, "Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot going on in that one match." But I really like it also because I think it did a great job of setting up the heel turn for Dan Murrell. Like there's a season 9's a fascinating, complicated beast, and it's a shame that like it ended too early, so we don't have a complete season, so we don't really see a lot of the plot points kind of conclude or have a conclusion in some way. But I really like the heel turn of Dan Murrell, and I really think there were a lot of good storylines and good stuff within season 9, even with the short end of the Schmoedown. And I don't know. I think the whole thing it's very interesting, which I think no one would disagree with. Whether you like it or not, that's a bigger question. But like, I think, as I said, even now I'm trying to like think about how I truly think about that match, and a lot of stuff's going on in my head because there's so much going on in that match. It's a very complicated beast, if you will.
It is a very complicated match. I'm more of the person that didn't like that match, but I understand people that did. Murrell's heel turn was interesting, and I think something that was needed for his character in the Schmoedown. I thought it was dumb that everybody was saying, "Oh, Harloff doesn't want Danger Zone to stay together anymore," and then season 9 here's Danger Zone together, and Murrell's the heel. I thought that was dumb, kind of. But another team that came together because of a storyline that was going on in season 9 was the Dojo, which was Riley and Jacoby Bancroft. And I was more interested in that storyline of Riley being like the old veteran bringing the younger Bancroft along. And I'm sad that we never really got to see where that was going, because I thought that was kind of a perfect role for Mark Riley to be in at that stage of his Schmoedown career. What did you think about the Dojo?
Honestly, like, I like the storyline, I like the idea, but we don't have anything. We have one match basically, and I think that match contained most of the cutscenes for it. So like, it's one of those things where I think it would have been good if we got more time from it, but because we didn't get more time from it, I'm like, it's not very memorable in my head just for that.
Yeah. What else about this section was memorable to you?
I do want to quickly say that one of the most surprising things about this section, it contains Barbarian's only teams match, which to me is it's shocking that Barbarian only played teams once, and that one time was with a Star Wars only player. It's just it's just very interesting in that novelty sense. But I do want to quickly, I just wanted to bring that up because I think I always like just of how talented and how accurate Barbarian is. He doesn't get a lot of matches for some reason. It's because like every time it looks like he's going to get a bunch of matches, someone else on his faction kind of like overshoots him in stardom, if you will. Like at the beginning when he was a rookie, you had that star-studded team of Merle, Riley, Bateman, and it's tough to get matches when you have all those stars, Roca, all those stars together, and I'm fighting it out for matches and stuff like that. And then once those guys left, then Griffin Newman and Khan were the team, and they had to promote that team rather than anyone else. So and Griffin Newman and Khan were the rising stars, and Barbarian still had his moments, but it is interesting where it's I feel like if he was put on any other faction, I think he would have had he would have had so many matches, but because he was on the Exchange for those years, and you could say for better or for worse, but he wasn't as featured because there was so much going on in the Exchange, and he was never the main attraction, if you will, for the most part, which isn't a bad thing. He was still an incredible player, made a tournament final, clearly accurate, one of the most talented players in the league, one of the most surprising non-belt winners, because you would think he would have won a belt. But I think in that case is fascinating. But I'll also quickly want to say, I think the Corruption 2 teams with Kalinowski and McKee and Chance and Fishburne, I think if the Schmoedown didn't end, I think we would have had gold from both those teams, because you would have had 2 teams debuting from a storyline breakup because of Corruption losing that match and having the breakup for forever. But who knows if forever's forever. But at the very least, you have Mike and McKee and Travis and Chance, and you just watch both of them. Even if they lose, that's interesting for the other team, because if the other team starts to do way better than one of them, then it's it would have been fascinating to see how Shannon would have managed that, because there was no manager better at managing people who are constantly succeeding, if you will, or being this person's succeeding much more than my other players, but I can keep my other players happy despite that. So I think there were so many storylines that could have come up from both these teams existing at the same time and starting at the same time. And who knows, maybe their first chance to a belt might have to go through each other, which would have been fascinating. So I think the teams division was actually going in a very healthy direction when it came to the 2 Corruption teams, when it came to the Dojo, which I think is a very, very promising team. And even the teams that lost with Andraco and Smets and the Exclusives, I think there were a lot of very promising teams that could have stayed around for a while and could have been well-known teams and could have got so many matches and be the new blood of the teams division. But then the Schmoedown ended, so it was just unfortunate timing within that regard.
Yeah, I completely agree. Where Mike and Marisol could have gone, they could have been better than Mike and Chance were together. We'll just unfortunately never know. And Chance and Travis Fishburne, that was going to be a sneaky good team, because I don't know that everybody that watched the Schmoedown watched the FCL, and Travis Fishburne was phenomenal in the FCL, and I think they could have been really, really good together as well. Barbarian and Gold Leader were perfect for the one team's match for Barbarian with the matching jackets and everything. Like I said, that was great. And I really wish that we could have gotten more of Smets and Draco together. I think that was going to be a really good team as well. A chance for these Star Wars players like Smets and like Gold Leader to show that they know about movies other than Star Wars, I thought was really cool. Because we'd seen IG players in teams before, but we hadn't seen Star Wars players in teams prior to this. So that was something that's going to be really interesting to me.
Absolutely. I think it's the natural evolution of the Schmoedown is starting to realize these Star Wars players and IG players have such specific strengths, and you could take advantage of them within the team's format as long as you pair them up with someone like an Andraco, someone like Alicia and Miller, someone like a Barbarian, if you will. So I always thought that was interesting and showcase the evolution of the game, which is the evolution of the Schmoedown as a game is the part that I was the most fascinated, that I fell in love with it, the part that I enjoyed the most, if you will. So I love the concept of these teams for sure.
Yeah, I agree. So it's sad that we didn't get to see more from any of these teams, but it was fun to watch them while they existed. Mm-hmm. Josh, where can people find you?
They can find me here on LGR. I just did a video with our good buddy Dagan. So if you want to go check that out, feel free. We were talking about the Schmoedown there. But support LGR. I think LGR is one of the greatest communities we have out there online. Patreon's great. I'm going to be on here every month, and who knows? We'll see where else. But if you just hit the subscribe button, like button, at least watch the videos, I always appreciate that. Leave a comment. We do read the comments, and we do if you have any ideas for episodes, we did this one from a comment, so we do have some future episodes lined up, but we're always excited to throw a viewer comment in there if we really like it. And yeah, if you just support LGR, that's supporting me, so I do appreciate that.
All right, and you can find me on Twitter or X or whatever Elon is calling the app this week at Adelia Chambo. I'm on Blue Skies as well now at Adelia Chambo, and here every Friday, 3 p.m. or 8 p.m. Pacific on the Open Table with Ferris, and on the Highlights channel every Tuesday, 3 p.m. Pacific with Snark on Starting 11, recapping the English Premier League. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you next month.
It's for real.